Welcome back everyone, John Panio here with another video. Today we're going to be going over skills, passives, support skills, as well as overall team composition and team building to be able to build the best team for the roster that you have. Because not everyone's going to have the best characters, and honestly you don't need to have the best characters to be able to play the game. As long as you understand the fundamentals about affinities, team composition, team building, passives, and support, then you'll be able to honestly progress and play through most of the game. So first and foremost, what is the difference between a passive and a support? Because the game talks about having skills that activate even though your characters aren't fighting, but what does that mean? Well, when you first start off the game, you actually don't gain access to supports right away. The difference between passive and support is, in order for you to gain access to passives, the character has to be on your team fighting. So if Ryoshu is on my team and fighting, I'll gain access to her passive. But if she's not on the field and not fighting and she's benched, I only gain access to her support. So what does this mean? This means that if I wanted to gain access to Gregor's passive, Emergency Rations, and if I wanted to gain access to Ryoshu's passive, Indiscriminate Art, Ryoshu and Gregor would both have to be on the team fighting in order for me to gain access to those passives. Their support skills are those skills that linger even if they're benched. Support are the skills that will give you the passives outside of combat, as in I can still gain access to Ryoshu's hustle if Ryoshu's on my team, but I lose access to her passive because she's not on my team. It's a little bit confusing, but the best way of understanding it is if you want to gain access to a character's passive, they have to be on your team fighting. Support skills are always in effect no matter what, whether or not your characters are fighting or benched. Now, what that means is what you want to do is you want to be able to build a team that has an overall theme. There's a lot of different themes right now. You could have a bleed build, a rupture build, a poise build, a charge build. There's a lot of different builds out there based off of the characters that you are given. So based off of this roster that I have right here, you can apply the logic to your roster as well depending on what units you have. Now, since my best unit is Gregor, I'm going to build around Gregor. I could technically build around, him because he's also a 3-star character, but when I look at his skills don't really synergize well because he only gains poise next turn, and all poise means is it just increases your critical rate. Now if I take a look at his second tier, if I was to gain access to his passive, on Clash Win gain +1 poise count. So this guy is just essentially a crit bot. He essentially does a ton of damage and he can do that by himself, and that's all he does. So he's a very good, strong, standalone unit, but he doesn't offer a lot of synergies to the team. An example though, with G Corp, Manager Corporal Gregor, he's actually got a lot of synergy because 1, he can heal with 2 greens for his passive, and with 5 greens for his support, the ally with the lowest HP will heal for 5 HP after winning Clash, which is very useful. But not only that though, if you look at his skill 1, he heals on skill 1, but his skill 2 applies Rupture, and Rupture is basically a stacking effect where you deal more damage to people who have Rupture, and it deals like a flat amount. But you also heal for 50% of the damage dealt, but also his skill 3 is it does 30% of the damage dealt as bonus damage if the target has Rupture already applied on it. And as you can see, this hits 3 times dealing with that, so you can have the potential of doing an extra 90% damage more. So based off of that, it means I should build a composition around Rupture. So what other units have Rupture? Surprisingly, she does not have Rupture, so I didn't really use Ryoshu, but the thing that makes Ryoshu really good pairing up with 3-star Gregor is her passive. Her passive Indiscriminate Art, if you chain 3 greens together, you will gain access to 24% more damage, but obviously you deal 25% more damage, but you take 25% damage, so it's a risk-reward ratio. But not only that though, one ally with the lowest max HP deals and takes 20% damage, which is not bad, but if you think about it, it synergizes very well with Gregor because his passive can heal and his support can heal, and he has 2 skills that will heal for 50% of the damage dealt. And his skill will heal for 100% of the damage though. So the synergy between these two characters is immense because one is going to turn you into a glass cannon, but this guy will always heal. Now, obviously this is just a small glimpse of what it would look like to have my team, so I'm going to be using, you know, these two characters as really strong. But now I got to figure out what other characters should I pair up with these two. Now, the next thing to take into account is affinities. If I take a look on the right side, the affinities here just represent the resources that my characters generate. Ryoshi will generate 3 skills that give you green, and Gregor will generate 3 skills that would give you green. Their desperation move requires a total of 5 browns and 1 wind. What that means is ideally I want to have characters that can generate wind but also use greens for their special moves, their egos if you will. Now, the only character on my roster that can provide me with wind, unfortunately, is Faust right now. I mean Faust and also Mersault, but let's take a look at Faust and Mersault because they generate wind. Let's see which one fits better into team composition. So if I take a look at Faust, she generates purple cubes and she generates wind tiles. Her passive, if I were to take a look at her passive, is gain 1 charge count after an attack. When I look at this, I see that she focuses on purple as her passive. I don't really have a good purple unit right now, but there's this guy right here, tier 1 or base center Heathcliff. If I take a look at Heathcliff, he also generates purple, and his passive is if I have 5 purple, deal 10% damage to target with higher max HP. And he also has a support which is spite driven. One ally with the lowest max HP deals 10% then blunt damage. And this could synergize pretty well with Faust because these two would now be essentially purple synergy. Now I gotta take a look at one other unit. I mean, we could take a look at Mersault too, and we can see that Mersault generates yellow and blue, which doesn't really help because he requires like rocks, and his whole gimmick is his passive is if you have low HP, you get a little bit more defensive stats, which doesn't really work in this team comp. So Heathcliff in this case is just a better selection. Now, for my 5th and final slot, we gotta figure out which character is gonna synergize the best. When I take a look on my right side to see my affinities, I can see right here, I'm producing 2 rocks, but I'm not really getting any benefits out of the 2 rocks. So I probably want to have a character where their special uses 2 rocks. If I click here, no one really uses rocks, so we're just making more rocks, but we're not using them, so it's wasted resources. We click on Mersault, we could technically use Mersault because he will be able to use the rocks generated for his ego, but he's not a very strong character on my team. If we take a look at Otis though, this is interesting. Otis actually provides more blues and wind. So let's take a look at her character. So her character on her skill 1 inflicts 2 rupture. Her skill 2 does 20%, well technically 40% more damage if you have higher speed, and she does 20% more damage if the target is above 50%. Now what's interesting is her passive is Executor does 10% damage if the target SP is below 0. Now, you might be thinking, well, I don't have a lot of rock users and it's not going to be that useful, but if you remember, Gregor has access to Dismember, which you can possibly get 2 of on your rotation, and she also gets access to 3 yellows. So potentially this synergizes really well because her yellow inflicts rupture, and not only does she inflict rupture, you could chain it with your Dismember and go into your skill 3, which applies bonus damage on your rupture. So as you can see right here, Otis is probably the best next in slot unit to apply in this team. Now you might be saying, well, isn't it better to have Yi Chong on the team because he's a strong unit, but even though he's a really strong unit and he can fulfill the affinity requirements for my ego. In terms of synergy, Otis at tier 1 is just much better because she applies Rupture, which synergizes very well with Gregor. She also has a passive that can also apply with Gregor because they use the same yellow rock synergy. We have Ryoshu here, which synergizes very well with the green cards or the green skills that Gregor is going to apply. We have Faust here, who is synergizing with Heathcliff, and Faust is here to be able to generate clouds for my Gregor to use his special, and she synergizes pretty decently with Heathcliff because these two are both purple user generators. So, as you can see right here, with this roster that I have, the optimal team for me to go is a green-purple build focusing on Rupture. So the game plan of this team is to be able to do a lot of damage with chainings. Ryoshu's passive of Discriminate are to do 25% more damage, and healing off the damage that you would take with Gregor's passive and skills. With Otis, she synergizes with the Rupture that Gregor applies, and with his skill 3 can do increased damage with more Rupture applied. With Faust, she generates the clouds required for Gregor's ego to be used, and because she has purple, I'm using Heathcliff because he synergizes very well with purple. Even though he doesn't synergize well with the other part of our team members here, he will be able to round out our team comp to make it so that number 1, the purple resources I do get is not useless, as in I can't use it with the ego, and number 2, synergizes well with Faust's purple if it ever comes to the point where I have to use her passive of self-charge. So, to summarize, building a team comp around the roster that you do have is more important than just using a bunch of 3-star, 2-star characters. You want to have a central theme to play towards. Either you want to play Rupture, you want to play Charge. There's a lot of gimmicks that you can build around with the roster that you do have. Tier 1 units and base centers actually provide a lot of value to specific different teams that you might be looking towards. So just because they're tier 1 doesn't mean they're useless. Surprisingly, these two characters synergize so well with Corporal. Faust and Sinner could be any unit replaced as long as they give me Cloud for Gregor, it will work. And the last thing to note is that passives only apply if your character is fighting, and support always apply no matter whether or not your characters are fighting or not fighting. So, hopefully this video helps you guys out a little bit. I know it can be quite confusing to try to figure out what's the best team I should build, what team comp I should run, what colors I should get together. Ultimately, it's a very intricate system, but it's a very fun system. This system right here is very resemblant to deck building in TCG games, which I really do enjoy doing. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, make sure you let me know down in the comment section down below. I stream quite a bit on Twitch, so you can catch me live on Twitch under John Panio, and I will see you guys later. Bye for now.